Well, hello and welcome to everybody. It's good to see a whole bunch of friends of mine from not just here in Australia, but a bunch of places. We're talking about the fact that it's our move and the move of all of our mates here in the strategy business, no matter what part of it you may play. The book really is fantastic because it contains a lot of his personal experiences wrapped around a whole bunch of great strategic tips, as you're going to hear. Mike, do you want to just say a word about yourself again?
Thanks very much, Dave. And look, thank you for everyone who's come along this evening. For people who don't know me so well, my background is actually I've got a degree in chemistry. I've been a buyer. I've been in marketing for 25 years with various businesses from McCaughlan, Benckiser, Fonterra, National Foods, and now I have my own consulting business as part of the Exponential Network.
Okay, let's go to the next chart, please. Strategization. The art of mobilizing people to implement a winning strategy. And the emphasis that I found really powerful when he first explained what he was writing, but also how to make sure it wins by mobilizing correctly. And I guess, as Joe knows, and I know from my experience, I've developed strategies for all sorts of companies. And the hardest bit is just getting the buy-in from everybody and the actual getting it to move. Coming up with the thought and the idea is actually the easy part of the business, I guess. So this is the powerful thing we're going to be talking about. This is a framework that Mike uses throughout the book, and he's going to explain a bit more about it in a minute. And I don't think it matters whether you're talking about Napoleon and armies of the past or, business strategies or marketing strategies or sales strategies. Ultimately, when you're trying to develop a great strategy, what you're trying to break down is, what is it that you could do that's different?
Absolutely. That's a core part of it. And I guess the philosophy that we have and try to get across within strategization. So I came across this word mobilization when I first moved to London at Reckitt and Colman about 1995, and we were looking to try and change the way that Reckitt and Colman operated. And I don't know if many of you know, but a lot of British companies were sort of at that time managed a bit like the British Commonwealth, where, you had the mother England sitting at home, and then each of the different countries in the Commonwealth or in the network were sort of sitting there running their own businesses. And once a year, we might get a visit from the Queen or King's representative coming out, normally in Australia or New Zealand. It happened to be in the summertime. And I don't know how much time was actually spent on business, but we had to do the presentations and stuff like that. So we'll talk more about mobilization, but we sort of really look at this in the book, and everything we do is the heart of successful strategic implementation.
You raise a good point, Mike, in terms of like when you think about armies and stuff, and the mobilization is getting everybody out and doing stuff at the right time in the right place to enact your strategy. I was just recently reading a new book about why Germany did not win World War I, and it all goes down to the first 14 days. They thought they had the right strategy. They failed to mobilize correctly. And I think I told you a story that this all reminded me of many years ago here in Australia. I was working on the launch of what was to be the first home computers for IBM. And we developed a fantastic campaign that everybody loved. It tested well. We developed fantastic point of sale material, and the big retailers all bought into it. They developed special sections of their retail stores, in Harvey Norman, etc., for this new idea of home computers. And it launched, and, big launch, lots of TV, everything was great. And a few days after the launch, the marketing director of IBM came around to the office and was like, hey, the launch was fantastic. You guys did a great job. Everybody's really aware of the campaign. That's terrific. How are sales going? Oh, we can't sell anything yet because the computers are still on the boat from America. And that was the great failure of mobilization, right? Because they hadn't aligned everything.
So, part of coming across here with this is, why did we write a book? It was very interesting, and I have to raise, and it's great that Kath is actually on the webinar. We were very fortunately in a group I'm part of, Lorraine and I, to be sitting down with Kath. Would have been about November last year. We were thinking about redoing our website, and Kath was telling us about the changes to her website, and we started then. She asked us these really, really interesting questions about our business and what we were trying to achieve. So I think I'd really like to thank Kath, and the other thing I'd just like to thank in terms of putting this book together is the first readers who contributed, and Michael Hanrahan at Publish Central, who helped at the final stages of pulling this together. We wouldn't be here without both Kath and Michael, but a number of other people through the process, and all those people have helped me through my career. Over to you, Joe.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mike. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to be involved in strategy in a few. The example that I'm going to talk to you about today involves a brand that I worked for many years, which was McDonald's restaurants, which I'm sure you recognize the name of. So everywhere you see that little chestnut, not chestnut, are the markets that I had the pleasure of working in over the years. And it was a great experience in that it opened my eyes to the differences between the different countries, regions, territories, and the similarities, especially in the kind of work that we do. In 2000, Prime Minister John Howard called a federal election and proposed a new tax, which was GST. And amazingly, he won the election on proposing a new tax. Now, the effect that had on McDonald's is that 10% that was added to many of the products that we sold meant or resulted in fewer customers coming into the restaurants. So what could we do? Well, we couldn't eliminate GST, although we took a couple of shots at it. The strategy was a bit more difficult, but after a lot of work, it was articulated like this: repositioning McDonald's marketing from targeting families to young adults. The messaging changed from an emphasis on moms with kids to young adults. And that strategy was brilliantly brought to life by DDB's campaign, Things That Make You Go,
And it's interesting, we use a lot of stats and things like that in the book. And the one that I sort of pull out here is that from work that McKinsey did in 2010, they identified that when people are actually involved in developing the strategy at the front line, it is simply more likely that strategy will actually be effective and actually create a winning platform to move forward. That's why it needs to be at the heart, because it connects all of these different elements of a great strategy. It needs to connect. If you're working with people, and we know from a lot of research that decisions and then commitment is made at an emotional level, not just at a rational level. So how we actually engage with people and get them on board needs to capture their heart, not just their mind. And I guess I was really, if I put myself out there as someone who didn't get this for a long time, and maybe it was my scientist background, I thought, it's got to be logic. If it's logical, then people will follow. And it took me a bloody long time to get to the point where I realized, actually, I can be as logical as I like, but if I can't get them on board to understand, then they aren't going to move forward. They're not going to follow. Since I've left the corporate career, we had one of the leading tool retailers who target tradies, if you like, within what's represented in 3 of the 4 chapters that we cover off within the book. It's a basic framework that you can go through, and it's not necessarily linear, and you may need to go backwards and forwards a bit to get it right. But firstly, starting off with who is what we call the strategic population that's going to really drive whether your vision and your strategy are actually going to be brought to life. So who are those key opinion leaders, those key influencers? What impact can they actually have, and how do we actually engage with them? The second question is, if you're a relatively small business, it's pretty easy for everyone in every function to actually understand the strategy. But if you're in a larger organization with different business units or different brands, one of the questions may be, do we need to cascade the strategy? Do we actually need to take the overarching organizational strategy and cascade that down to the business unit, the function, or whatever? So an example of that would be, and I know some people are actually on the webinar who are part of, when I was at National Foods, we had an overarching National Foods sort of strategy, but we played in some quite different spaces in the market. We were leaders in the juice category, we were leaders in the milk category, we were leaders in some aspects of the cheese category, and also within yogurts. How do we translate that, overall national food strategy into each one of those different category areas, not just with marketing, but also cross-functionally? So what did it mean for sales? What did it mean for operations and the supply chain? What did it mean for R&D in terms of building the brand, supplying the marketplace, etc., making sure our customers like Woolworths and Coles, that were pretty hard to keep on board, making sure that we were doing the right thing by them as well. The third step is really then around clarifying the gap of change that's required, mobilizing the people around that, and I'll talk a bit more about. Then staying on track really looks at what measures are we going to put in place to make sure that not only their broad organizational strategy is operating and working, but also how are the people that are responsible for its implementation coming along for the journey. And you may use tools like employee engagement. You might use other sorts of tools to do that. And last but not least, the key thing to keep in mind is what I call manage the squeaky wheels. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But one thing about strategy, particularly if you're looking at large organizations or franchise networks, you've got to deal with the squeaks, because if not, you end up doing a lot of damage to whether it's the car, the strategy, the organization, call it what you will. So you've either got to oil it or replace it. And it links to a question that's just come up, Dave, is a lot of businesses are not prepared to face up to the real challenges that they're facing. That's either because they don't understand the market, they don't understand what's coming at them, either in the short, the medium term. Unfortunately, also, it's because some leaders and their ego won't let them accept that maybe the stuff they've done in the past may have worked, but it's not going to work going forward.
Well, my experience goes back a few years, and I think I've seen, what was described. There were, and there continue to be a variety of places that will tell you how to do business planning, and all of them, claim to be the best way to do it. I think there are a couple of potential problems. One is the one that was initially described. The boss comes into the room and says, "Here's where we're going." The other is a boss comes into the room and says, "Where do you think we should be going?" In any organization, if you don't have a leader that inspires to follow, no matter how good the strategies are, you're not going to mobilize it. There are a lot of people saying, "Well, the boss is weak. I'm not going to do this. He's never right," whatever it is. The best combination is for the boss to sit with a group of key people within the organization that represent, the organization, and go through whatever process they happen to choose out of the latest one.
Yes, the ultimate lack of mobilization is that get the staff to mobilize themselves to go look for another job. Yeah. Can I just, Mike, before we do anything else, there's one question from Sean, who is a guy I know, and he's asked a really good question, which is a key aspect of strategies in developing insights and coming up with unrecognized human truths, a skill that requires creativity, persistence. What's your tip? I know there's some stuff in the book. What's your 30-second tip for that?
Well, one of the key processes, which is pretty well recognized, we use, but I guess the key thing, which is using the 5 whys process, basically to get to the root cause and of issues or opportunities that sit within the market and move away from just looking at the data. So really unpicking and getting down into a deep understanding of what's the driver behind the problem, the opportunity, rather than just looking at the symptoms.
Because to me, that's the most exciting area that at least a marketer can be involved in. And regrettably, I've talked to lots of them that aren't involved in. But you almost have to be a detective in that area. Finding an insight when it happens is just an amazing experience and motivating to the organization. But the reality is, an insight is almost always out of sight. It's hidden. That's what makes it fun, and also makes it potentially quite valuable.
Yeah,
lots of great stuff in the book. How do you want to sum up the reason why people should read this?
Well, I think as one of the people, my clients who actually was a first reader of this book said, it actually is like a playbook. So the way that we've designed this book really is you can read it, you might see some interesting stories and some examples. A lot of the examples also are Australian examples, unlike many other business books that are around. So we've actually picked up a lot of Australian examples as well as sort of global ones I've been involved in. But it actually does take you through the processes and the tools that are there. So it's as much a reference book as it is just a book you hopefully put on the shelf. And that's the feedback I've had from everyone who's read it so far. To me, that was the objective, is not just to create a nice read, but actually something that people can use again and again and again.
Let's go to the next chart as a reminder to everybody. This is the book. It's available at Amazon and Booktopia. But the best way to buy the book is to go to your site, right, Mike?
So, yes, you can get it on there and on all the other ones as well. It is available as an ebook on both Kindle and Topia and other. One other thing I would like to say at the end of this, every book that we sell on our website, we donate $5 to Bicycles for Humanity.